Hi, guys.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome. My name is Alice Knapp and I'm the CEO of the Ferguson Library. And while I'm talking, which will be brief, I promise you, this is a great opportunity for you to silence your phone. I see a lot of them are out taking photos. That's great. Put them on Instagram. Put them on Facebook. This is a big deal. We are so excited tonight, but I need to tell you about the Friends of the Ferguson Library. How many of you, this is either your first time in the Ferguson Library or your first time at an author's event, just a show of hands? Congratulations, you are all now members of the Friends of the Ferguson Library. This is a special deal, and why it is if you like authors and you like author talks, you are going to get the heads up before the general public finds out about our authors that are coming. You also get a discount at our bookshop, our used bookshop downstairs, and you get our newsletter. That's what's going on. Now, while those perks are very exciting, what you are underwriting are the Friends of the Ferguson Library. Let me tell you what they do. They're the secret sauce that makes this library great. They run a literary competition and have done so for 38 years for children in grades 3 through 12. And some of those who have been winners have now gone on to be published authors. They also do the Books for Babies program. Actually, that started here in Stamford in 1986 and is now a national program. But every child born in Stamford receives a board book from the Friends of the Ferguson Library. Many of you know about the fact that we give books away with our good friends, the Stamford Public Education Foundation, so that children can start their own library in their homes. But what you may not know is that Scholastic is very good to us, and they also give us extra books for buying our board books from them. And again, we give those back out so that children can build their own library. So I can go on forever about how great the Friends of the Ferguson Library are, and you will find out as you start getting the newsletters. But I'm going to hand it over to Mary Thies, who is on the board of the Friends of the Ferguson Library.
Thank you, Alice. It is my great pleasure and privilege tonight to introduce our speakers. First, to tell you about John Brunig, who will be interviewing Andrew McCarthy tonight. John is the editorial page editor for the Stamford Advocate and the Greenwich Time, and writes editorials and columns for the Hearst, Connecticut media's daily and weekly newspapers. He and his wife recently taught a class at the UConn branch here in Stamford on journalism films. John has been honored for Best Opinion or Commentary Writing by the New England Society of News Editors. He is a recipient of the Cameron Duncan Media Award, presented each year to a journalist for outstanding work on issues related to poverty, and is this year's recipient of the Connecticut Library Association's News Media Award. His particular interest tonight in talking with Andrew about his new book grows out of his own time hiking Connecticut trails with his son. I probably don't need to introduce you to Andrew McCarthy, but I'm going to do so anyway. He is an actor, a travel writer, and a television director. He is the author of 3 previous books, including Brat, an 80s story, Just Fly Away, and The Longest Way Home. All of them were New York Times bestsellers. He served for 12 years as the editor-at-large at National Geographic Traveler magazine. Perhaps best known as an actor for 4 decades of film acting, he has appeared in numerous films, including the iconic Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire, and Less Than Zero. He has performed on Broadway and in television. He has also directed episodes of Orange is the New Black, Gossip Girl, White Collar, and The Blacklist. And he has received numerous awards for direction of the short film News for the Church. This evening, we are delighted to welcome Andrew's reflections on his newest book, Walking with Sam. Welcome to you both.
Hi, guys. It's so nice to see this crowd. I've been here for other events, but it's just great to see the room packed. So I have to ask, has anybody read this book yet? That's a good number. Has anybody read any of Andrew's other books? How many of you have seen his movies? Book versus film, that's a good percentage anyway, right? He's such an elegant writer, which you know if you've read his books. And reading this one, as he journeys over 500 miles as a pilgrim with his son, he'll make your feet hurt, he'll make you feel the dirt, in your clothes. He's also a reliable travel guide as well, and don't underestimate what you'll learn about his travels from reading his work. And yet he'll also toss in enough references to his films, to satisfy the film buffs among you. What really stands out for me personally in the book is that we learn about Andrew as a father, just as a dad. We also learn about him as a son because the shadow of his own father is sort of following him throughout this journey. Well, first of all, congratulations on getting the book out, the work that went into it. And for, the dozen or so people, this is sort of an inside joke, but I have to reference this. There's a little maybe a walking joke that comes up once or twice, where Sam is teasing you for being jealous of Matthew McConaughey, kind of, right? Now, I don't know if you noticed. I noticed the other day looking at the New York Times bestseller list. You were at like number 7. Matthew McConaughey was at number 8. So,
I wonder if his book had been there 96 weeks and mine was there 1 week.
That's okay.
But I noticed it too.
You take the win, right? So, one of the remarks...
And I'm not really jealous of Matthew.
No,
I just find I find his unabashed sort of belief in Pollyannic positivity awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And it works for him. He just believes I'm the biggest movie star in the world, and my God, he is. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, how did that happen? And anyway, so my son was teasing me about that.
Yeah. It just was serendipitous from the show of this anyway. So one of the things I think that really works in the book is, and I wondered if it's sort of true if we took any two people in this room and sort of put them on a path, is how many days is the walk?
It's about a month, about 32, 33.
So like 32, 33 days, and it's almost like it pushes the relationship. You're covering ground that would have taken you 30 years in some ways.
Well, yes, that was the whole point of us going, really. My goal was to, should I explain a bit what the Camino de Santiago is? Yeah, the Camino is this, it's called the Camino de Santiago. It's this ancient pilgrimage route across the north of Spain that first began in the 9th century when the Catholic Church decreed that the bones of the Apostle James had been found in the farthern westernmost reach of the Iberian Peninsula, and anybody who marches there will get half their time in purgatory knocked off, which, that's a good deal, right? So the faithful came running, walking, but it was really more about real estate because Islam had taken over Spain and the church wanted it back. And they said, while you're marching across Spain to get your almighty soul purified, kick out the damn Moors. And so it was the beginning of the Crusades and the Knights Templar and all these kind of bloody, gory history. And it worked, and they recaptured Spain for the church, and it's been that way ever since. And so since then, after that, the Camino fell out of favor for many centuries, and with very few people walking. And then somewhere in the mid-20th century, it had this resurgence, and now it's incredibly popular again. And I first walked it 25 years ago, and it was a life-changing experience for me. And I wanted to always walk it again. And as my son was turning 19, cusping sort of manhood and going out into the world on his own, I thought I would like to sort of re-establish the ground rules for our relationship, how it's based, as opposed to parent-child. He wasn't listening to that anymore. And how do we, as two adults, sort of communicate? And as you alluded to, a lot of the book there was the shadow of my dad over the book, because when I left home at 17, and my relationship with my dad, in essence, ended at that moment. And it was one of the great regrets of my life, and we reconciled before his death. But I did not want that to happen with my children. And so I thought if there's a way that we could sort of reestablish our relationship in this way and spend this time, it might be a valuable thing. And he was, and why it happened then was because he had a girlfriend and was really disappearing. It's like, oh my God, is Sam gone already? Have we lost him already? And then, as fate would have it, she dumped him. And being a good parent, I pounced on that. And I said, hey, Sammy, you want to walk that Camino? And he was like, whatever. I said, is that a yes, whatever? I said, sure. So I literally walked into the other room, went to my computer, bought 2 plane tickets, and 2 days later we were walking across Spain. And I knew, because if we waited too long, he would change his mind, and that would be that. And I have to say, on day 2, he did say to me, Dad, what is the point of this effing walk? And he didn't say effing, so, and then to spoil it so you don't have to read the book, on the last day, but no, it's about the journey, you still have to read the book, on the last day he said to me, Dad, that's the only 10 out of 10 thing I've ever done in my life. So, right? And...
You hear that?
No, but I mean, so, and that's not me, that's just sort of what the Camino does.
I did think you can't really ruin the end of the book. Right? It's about the journey.
But I mean, I always find I write a lot of quest stories in travel writing, and I always find if you're going to write a quest story, it's best to achieve your goal.
Right. And this could have gone south on day 2.
It could have gone south many times. Yeah. And it almost did.
Day 12, yeah. So, you just did something reflexively, and I may have this detail wrong, but it fascinated me as I was reading the print book. I thought, I wonder what he did for the audiobook. Because I thought, do you do that yourself? Do you get a third party to do it so you don't have to imitate your son, which you just did? And then many times he calls you bro. So can you tell us, without me sort of revealing into this, how you approach the audio version?
Well, my son read it with me. And he hasn't read the book at all. My son's not a great reader, and so when I was turning the book in, I said, Sammy, do you want to look at this? Because, I'm turning it in here. And he read about the first 10 pages, and he said, it seems like the trip. I'm like, okay. And anyway, so we read the audiobook, and he read his dialogue. And so when we did the dialogue banter, he came in the studio, and we did that together. And we almost killed each other just like on the trip. So, but that was nice to do. Although he called me yesterday, and he said, Dad, I started listening to the audiobook. I'm terrible. And he sounds just like I did as a young actor. My son is an actor as well. He's on a show called Dead to Me. Anyhow, anyway.
No, that's fine. Well, can you share it? He hasn't read the book, and I did want to ask you if he'd gotten around to it yet. What about the rest of your family? And you have 2 other kids, so...
I can't think anyone in my family has ever read anything I've written.
No.
My parents, my brothers, my...
It's the same for me.
No, they don't know. And I don't think my kids have ever seen... Well, I know my son Sam saw Weekend at Bernie's, a movie I did, when he was like 15, and he said to me, for those of you who haven't seen this, an incredibly stupid movie about 2 guys who go to their boss's house for a weekend retreat in the Hamptons, and the boss dies, and they decide to pretend he didn't die so that they can party. And it's kind of like The Godfather, Anyway, my son saw that when he was about 15, and he said, Dad, I love you. That's the stupidest movie I've ever seen. To which I said, well, that's the point, dude. And my daughter saw, some of her friends told her she should watch Pretty in Pink, and she's 16, and so she watched the trailer and said, I'm not going to watch some movie where you're kissing some other woman. I don't want to see that. But I mean, I think their approach is quite right. I'm just their dad, and that's ancient history. It's long before they're born.
As a side note, I was taking my mother-in-law, we went to visit her in New Jersey, and we just walked into this neighborhood tavern to take her to dinner last night. We're waiting there. It's the drink list, and the first drink is Pretty in Pink.
It has an extraordinary life, Pretty in Pink. I never thought that would be the case. I mean, right? You know, I'm amazed by that. And I was amazed even then. I had it all wrong. I thought when... First, I should say people like Pretty in Pink like the story. So I had just finished a movie called St. Elmo's Fire, and it hadn't come out yet. But it was getting like buzz, and so they said I wanted to audition for this next John Hughes movie, and they said, well, he's not right for the part, because the part was written for sort of a square-jawed, broad-shouldered quarterback type, and I was not that. And so, but they gave me a courtesy audition, what they call. So they let me come in, and I read, and I walked in the room, and Molly was there. Molly Ringwald was there, the actress, and which is rare. They're not usually there, people in the movie. So anyway, I read the scene, and I read it, and John Hughes was in the back of the room, and a couple other people, and I read the scene once, and I went, thank you. I was like, F these people, and I walk out the room, you know. And as I walked out, apparently Molly turned to John Hughes and said, that's the guy. And John Hughes said, that wimp? And she said, yeah, he's dreamy, he's poetic, that's who I would... Anyway, so Molly got me that job, and John, to his credit, said, I don't get it, but okay. You know, and I mean, that's what John Hughes did so well, is give young people credit for intelligence and a true emotional life, you know, and that's what those movies are about, and why they're still valid today, because they honored, you know, when you're 16, 17, and 18, you're the first person who's ever been in love, you know, and you're the first person who has ever experienced heartache, you know, and then he honored that in that way, and that's why kids see it now. When you turn your kids onto that movie, they're like, well, the hairdos are funny, but I feel the same way, you know. So anyhow, I digress.
Well, no, and I wasn't thinking about this before, but in the book, Sam at 19, as you say, it's just serendipitous, right? Well, I guess it's not that you take him on the walk as he's in recovery from this relationship, and he's 19, and you're sort of struggling with Sam. I mean, as a reader, you're struggling with Sam through it. And I think we're also empathizing with you as the dad, thinking, he's talking about this every day, he's talking about this every day. But by the end of the book, we sort of see Sam mature and work his way through that.
Well, I mean,
it's his own coming of age, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, the Camino abounds in metaphor, you know, and it's everywhere you go on the Camino, everything's a metaphor. So I knew I had a book, for example, when we're walking. I'm a travel writer in my other life, so when we started walking, I was keeping notes, just some random notes, because you never go anywhere as a travel writer without knowing sometime you're going to write about something about this. So I was keeping sort of notes for a little while, and the walk is, for 500 miles you walk across to Santiago de Compostela, the city in the west. But beyond, and that's where the pilgrimage ends at the cathedral. But beyond Santiago, about 50 more miles, you can walk to the sea, a place called Finisterre, which is end of land. And many people feel the pull to walk onto the sea. I never did. I was happy to make it Santiago and sit myself down. And anyway, about halfway through, Sam learned about Finisterre, and he said, I'm going to walk to Finisterre. And I was like, go for it, dude. And at that instant, my little travel writer light bulb went, oh, gee, because the idea that my son would go beyond my accomplishments. I mean, it's hardwired into every parent, right, that we want our kids to go beyond us, be the first one in the family to go to college or to go to medical school or whatever, and for our kids to succeed us. And so when he said he was going to go beyond what I had done in the walk, I said, oh, I have a book here to match the physical journey matching the emotional one that I'm hoping to. And, I said, Sam, so I thought about that for a few days, and I finally said, Sammy, I'm going to write a book about our trip. What do you think of that? And he said, well, do I have to write anything? And I was like, no. And he goes, then go for it. So,
I wondered about that, though, because there almost could have been a different book. It's so interior in terms of what you're thinking. And I wondered if Sam had written a chapter, and not that this would have happened, but if you had alternated chapters, it would have been an entirely different book, right?
Well, sure. I mean, I think everyone, it's like life, but everyone walking the Camino, we can walk together side by side for 500 miles and we'll have extraordinarily different trips. You know what I mean? It's one of the great things about talking and walking is you talk, and if you look at the transcript, you might be able to read it in 5 minutes, but that might take place over 3 hours of walking. It makes you talking, and then you fall into silence, and you ruminate, and you do that kind of thing, then 20 minutes later you go, and then I was thinking, and you right back into it again, and walking is the natural rhythm to which we should process things, and emotionally, mentally, and we've gotten so away from that. It's one of the amazing things about the Camino, it just strips you down by sheer attrition, by the sheer volume of walking, and physically it wears you down, so then emotionally it just strips you kind of bare. And there's something wonderful about everyone is sort of walking the Camino for some reason, or they think there's a reason why they're walking. Usually the reason they think they're walking is revealed for just kind of a surface reason, and underneath they sort of find out why they are walking. And my goal, like I said, was to sort of have a man-to-man relationship, I guess, with my son, and I realized so much of it was I just didn't need to talk. I had the ultimate luxury that a parent gets with an adult child, which was time. And I didn't need to be wise or solve anything or have any answers. And I think you sit someone down to talk and you don't get very far, but you get them moving. Eventually it all comes out, And so every morning I would just sort of go, just don't say anything. We'd start walking, and whether it took 5 minutes or an hour and a half, and then someone would go, well, and then I was thinking, and off he'd go, and he'd go do all his processing. And I think you're right, he did process an extraordinary amount of emotional truth for him, and that what he needed to process in a very short period of time, because he was talking about it for hours a day, and I was just kind of going,
Like therapy.
yeah, after what he said, I think I learned to trust you a lot more, Dad, because I didn't have to have the answers. I didn't have to know better. I didn't have to be with the Father. I would just be able to receive him and see him.
You didn't have to rush an answer.
Yeah, and I allowed him, I wanted him to see me, because that's all we ever want in life, right? Isn't it just see me, see who I am? And that's been a big deal in my life, because something I've carried for a long time, that notion of see me and see you, just like, because now the Brat Pack, to go back to that, has become this iconically affectionate term about a group of actors in a time in pop culture, and we represent your youth in a certain way. So people see me, and they look at me, and they come up and they go, oh, I love Pretty in Pink, it's so great. And they start talking, and their eyes kind of glaze over, and I realize, oh, they're gone. They're not talking to me anymore. They're talking to themselves in their own youth. And that moment when you're 18, 19, whatever it is, and that's an incredible moment in life, when our life is a blank slate to be written upon, and we're just cusping into the world, and it's a thrilling time. There's no time like it, and everything is really potent and felt deeply, and it's an amazing time. And I and other members of the Brat Pack have come to represent that moment. And so they look back on it, particularly the older they get, with even greater affection. And so they see me and they go, I love you. Because I know, and it's not that it's wonderful, and I've learned to receive that as a beautiful thing, to represent that to people. But that took me a long time to realize that, and to accept that. When the Brat Pack first came out, not that I remember, but it was June 10th, 1985, and there was an article in New York Magazine that one writer wrote, and he was writing an article about an actor named Emilio Estevez, and he didn't like him, and so I think he was jealous, frankly. He was a young writer as well, and so anyway, he wrote this scathing article about a group of young actors, and he termed it the Brat Pack. And it came out on a Tuesday, and by Friday, the entire country was using the term Brat Pack and has not stopped in reference to us 35 years later. And it's an amazing thing, particularly in our world of media and outlets everywhere, that it was in one magazine article for 1 week in Region magazine, and the whole country is still saying it, who's going to reference it, and it was kind of amazing, and we hated the term. We absolutely hated it, because who wants to be a brat? Who wants to be in some pack? You just want to be seen and starting your career.
You don't want to be a rat either, though.
Well, those guys embraced it. But I think we thought we were brats or something, or we didn't deserve what was happening to us, and so he must be kind of right. Also you're 22. You're not Frank Sinatra at 35 going, I'll have you whacked. You know what I mean? So, we were these kids, and it did affect our careers. I always thought Martin Scorsese's not going to call up somebody who's in the Brat Pack, and it's true, he never has, can I just say? So we hated it. So it was a long journey, and the public was like, no, Brat Pack's awesome, it's always been awesome, but we didn't feel that way about it. And so so I just didn't feel seen. You know, I felt like my life is beginning, my career is not really happening, it's this wondrous thing. And then suddenly this article comes out and I felt like I'd instantly lost control of the narrative of my career. And in very many ways my life, because it altered who I would become in the world, you know? And like I said, it took me decades of avoiding it, trying to dodge it, trying to duck it, to find being okay about it, to find turning around, embracing it 180 degrees and going, oh my God, it's an incredible blessing, and I am more than the sum of my parts because I'm a member of this iconic group from that moment in pop culture. And so I realized there's something even better than being seen. It's being seen by you so you can see yourself in a certain way. You know what I mean? That's even better because there's this connection that happens. So the sort of notion to bring it back to this, the idea of being seen, has always been something I've been conscious of. So I wanted to really be able to see, you know, our kids look like us, they kind of sound like us, we think they're kind of like us. And you know, of course, as you know, they're not, you know? And to really get the chance to see who he is and let him, and that's the other thing, letting our kids see us. I think Sam says, I put in the book, because it takes a long time, if ever, for kids to see their parents as real people. You know, and I think that's true. I think the inverse is equally true. And so, I mean, that was what my intent was with walking. And I said to, and I'll stop now, the other day Sam called me up and he said, hey Dad, you got 7 minutes? And I was like, go. And he still lives with us. We can't get rid of him. I mean, but he called on the phone and he had something on his mind he wanted to process and work through. And I said, yeah, go. And, I mean, it took him a half hour. But the idea, I don't think that call would have happened before the walk. You know what I mean? He just wanted to talk something out and he'd go, yep. I don't know, Sammy. Yeah, thanks for calling. And that's all he wanted. And he figured himself out, you know? He just wanted to backstop. You know, when I left home, I didn't feel, through nobody's fault, probably my own because I'm such a loner by nature, but I didn't feel like there was anyone behind me. You know, so I always wanted, like, I'm a little league backstop for my kids. Like, I'm right here. You go out there, and when you turn and look around, I'm right here. But you go out there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what I wanted to establish with my kids. And I didn't feel that way going, again, because I've always felt sort of alone in the world, which I like to a large degree. But I wanted my kids to feel, anyway, it's not a therapy session. Well, it is, Doctor. So then,
well, on a very serious note, it's good therapy for me. So what really resonated for me, where I empathized, is, and some of readers here who read my column know this, my son, who we adopted from a NICU after he was born 11 years ago, drug addicted, and we watched him go through withdrawal. And after that, you kind of spend your life as the backstop. So when I got to the part, you wrote in the book about Sam having a difficult birth, and it couldn't help but make me think, well, of course you're the backstop. You're just always waiting for him to knock that cup over, as you write.
Yeah, that's one of the things, the degree to which we're overcompensating and over-attentive and over-solicitous is the degree to which we're not actually serving them. You know, that's what I've come to realize. And it doesn't stop me. And the walk was one of these active ways to just try and actively stop doing that. Because I just do it out of habit. I just see him and I'm frightened that something's going to happen, you know. So, and I realized I did that for years, and just that, the degree to which we're over-solicitous, the degree to which we're under-serving, because that energy is being taken away from where it really should be going, right? And so to just try and learn that, and to learn how to be a parent, too, is, you know, a long process, because I think I had also this notion, right, somewhere, had some insecurities that I didn't know how to do this, and I couldn't take care and keep them safe, you know. And when my son was born and he was dying the second he was born, I was like, I knew it.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think I've ever lost, I think I'm still in some way in startle from that startle response, you know, I'm still like that, you know, and again, I think the Camino actually helped me with that, to kind of go, he's out in the world. It's good.
I don't want to confuse the people who aren't familiar with it. Could you give them a little, not that there was a typical day on the Camino, but could you give them a sense of what one of those days looked like?
Sure. I mean, You wake, well, my son is 19, or was 19, so that means he wants to sleep till the crack of noon. And I'm, 60. Can we talk about turning 60? Oh my God. Wow. I mean, I was famous for being young, and suddenly I'm like, how did this happen? And anyway, and so that means I'm up at dawn, basically. And so you're walking about 15 miles a day, and the Camino, because it's sprung up, it's not like the Appalachian Trail where you have your whole world on your back and you have tents and things. You're walking from village to village, and often you walk there are about 5 or 6 large cities along the way, too. So there's something really interesting about walking from a village of 12 people in the morning into a city of 250,000 people that day. And then the next day, even better, is walking out of a city of 250 back into the nothingness, and so you're walking from village to village, because back in the day, these little villages sprung up about a day's walk from each other to serve the pilgrims and service them, and they were many of them have these beautiful little Romanesque churches from the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, and because it was originally, still is, a Catholic route, although most people, I don't think, walk it for that reason anymore. We certainly didn't. And there are little towns and food, so you're always getting food along the way. You can always, you're part of a culture and a current of, there's something interesting about a pilgrimage route in that it's been walked for centuries and centuries by millions and millions of people. So, and its original intent was an internal intent, like walk back into yourself, and you walk, as the yoga people say, it has good bhav. You walk sort of, you fall into this current of other walkers, and you really feel it. And what's interesting is there's so many, and you get like a community of walkers, because there's so many people walking it, and you sort of meet people along the way who are on your same timetable. And so we entered into this kind of pod of a dozen people that me and Sam would walk the days together alone for about 12, 15 miles. So 7, 8 hours, 6, 7, 8 hours you're walking, with stops and lunch and whatever. And then you'd meet your friends, these people you meet along the way, in the Plaza Mayor of whatever village, and you'd sort of have dinner. And so it's a great kind of culture, and it is your entire world. You are never bored, because there's so much going on, and usually you're just thinking about, very immediate things. But, my son said, it's going to be so boring, and it just never was. I don't think that was ever an issue. And there is a lot going on internally, and whether you like it or not. And so the days are like that. And we walked in August. The first time I walked in July, so both times it was brutally hot. But, May and September are always beautiful. But
You didn't do that.
But we didn't do that. So that's sort of what the days are like. You start in, Sam was like, why don't we start at noon? I'm like, because it's northern Spain and it's August and it's 110 degrees and there's no shade. And, he's like, so? I'll meet you there, Sammy.
And you did sometimes.
Sometimes we did, yeah.
Has there developed any kind of, that month-long experience, I would think, has built into some sort of shorthand between the two of you? Do you have any shorthand, any references you make that annoys the rest of your family? Because you were away for a month, right?
Yeah, it's one of those, Paul Theroux, the great travel writer, always has a line that said, you come back, but you never come back all the way. There's something about that. I mean, I don't know, I guess there's a certain, my son and I have always had a certain connection and stuff, but we don't have a shorthand per se in that, except it's just, he'll just go, you got a minute, and I'm so grateful for that all the time, even when I don't, I'm like, yeah.
Deep breath.
Yeah, what's up? Right. Because you wait that give me 5 minutes, they're on to something else. You know what I mean? I learned that, like, when your kids, if they actually really need you or want your things, just give me 10 minutes, I'm just finishing up, and by then they're gone.
Like all this bobbing heads.
Right? I mean, but it's like, if you want that, and again, it's a fine line between abdicating ourselves for our kids, like we were kind of talking about there, and being there, and sort of, there was a moment on the walk when, my son and I were walking together on the trail, and then the trail got narrow, and so I walked behind him, but that's not good for conversation, so I started walking next to him again, and there was no trail, so I was walking in the weeds, and along the way there were these pylons that would tell you how far it is to Santiago, 284 miles, so there are a lot of them along the way, and we were coming upon one, they're cement, they're about that high, and we were coming upon them as we were walking, and I tripped, I caught a root and tripped, and went down hard, right next to one. So this pylon went zipping past my face. And, I'm old enough to realize now, oh my God, that could have been a life-changing moment right there. And I fell down hard, and I'm pretty agile, so I don't fall, and when I do, I bounce back up because I'm so embarrassed. I just went, no, I'm good, but I fell hard, and I just stayed there, and I was just shocked by it, and it was two things then. I thought, my son needs to see, let him help you, and I do not want to make myself vulnerable like that to my kid to show frailty and fallibility, and the others, but he needs to help you. Dad, he says, but allow him to help you, Andrew, because I normally do, no, I'm good, kiddo, I got it. And that was a big deal for both of us. And it was also this idea, going back to what we were just saying, before that, I made my life more difficult so that I could keep talking to my son, and I got into the weeds, and I tripped myself on the metaphor and actual root, and I went crashing down because I was abdicating myself to make my son's life easier, in that instance. So there are all these kind of, and as you're walking, you got nothing but time to think about that and apply that metaphor to what happened there. And it was like, I did that. I just sort of made my life more difficult so that I could, but I wanted to do that. And so that was a choice I made, so I'm responsible for that. And all that kind of stuff which we don't think about in our daily kind of lives, but you really, and that process was really interesting to me to sort of really dissect that moment. I mean, it's a little silly kind of thing, but it's not. That kind of stuff would happen every day, and you think about those kind of things. And the idea of being vulnerable and letting my son help me and help me up, I don't think he's ever helped me up before, And he was like, you okay, Dad? I'm like, yes, thanks. He's like, yeah, come on, And that intimacy of that was, I don't know, that went deep for both of us.
It's a big part of the book, that moment.
Is it? Yeah.
No, I thought it was. It just feels like you see each other in that moment.
Yeah.
He sees you.
Yeah, and it's a place, so I don't want to be silent because you're the dad, so you need to be like, we got it together here.
Yeah.
And it was a fear of mine that I always wasn't man enough, or square-jawed enough to be the guy from Pretty in Pink. You know what I mean? I wasn't that person. I've always harbored that fear. But then, to carry this even further, Doctor, I realized that was a fear, and I write about it a little in the book that I still carry, and yet it's a false fear. I don't really feel that way anymore. And yet I'm so used to having that fear that I just operate from it.
Right.
And I'm doing myself, and consequently them, a disservice by not discarding that old fear that is just sort of a hollow shell, but still carry it around, if that's making any sense at all. And so, and again, that kind of comes from walking the community going, I don't really feel that way anymore. Why am I still acting as if I feel that way? And responding, more importantly, responding as if I feel that way, or having that motivate my actions. Does it make any sense? Anyway, we can talk about Molly again.
Well, this is more of a technical question. As a writer, I was curious about sort of the meat and potatoes of putting the book together, because I thought you had to make some hard decisions, as you said, about the intimacy of the subject and Sam, what to reveal, what to put in, what to put out. And then I thought you also must have just had a deluge of day-to-day experiences that probably you could leave here now and go, oh, boom, I could have put that in the book. I totally forgot about that.
Well, the biggest challenge is, of course, to honor his sort of privacy in the sense. It's like, it's not really about Sam. It's called Walking with Sam, but it's really, they're just facets of him that reflect back to me. So he talks about, do you ever get jealous, Dad? And he's talking about his jealousy. And it's like, it's not my place to talk about my son's feeling jealous. But I then go, I never told you about when I was jealous on my honeymoon. So I would then, for the reader, bring it back to me and use him as sort of a springboard to be about, because it's my journey that I have the right to talk about, not his. I don't honestly even know what his journey, he's talked to me for 5 hours a day about it. I don't really know, and it's not my place to do that. So that was the big challenge of that, was sort of to find places to bounce it back to me in that regard. And, just tying together the physical journey with the emotional one and braid that in, and so that they hopefully just sort of seamlessly, hand off to each other in that way.
The characters, the pod of people that you talked about, the dozen or so people that keep coming back, what's sort of magical about them? We don't know too much about them because it's the same as if any of us took that walk, right? We'd meet some people, see them Monday, again on Thursday. have you reconnected? Have any of them read the book and circled back to you?
I don't know if anyone read the book. We have stayed in touch with a bunch of them, and that's what social media is good at now. And Sam did go to the wedding of the people that were, the white people who were getting. He went down to their wedding, in Costa Rica, as everyone from our pod did except me. And and I'm still friends with one person that I walked it 27 years ago, a German lady, yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, because on the Camino, you don't know, like many situations that are intense, you don't, like when you work with them, you don't know about them. And yet, but what's interesting about the Camino is people talk very directly and clearly and openly right away. We're all here doing something, and so a lot of people, one of the things that make me cringe a bit was people go, they want to talk about their Camino experience. What's your one Camino insight? And I'm like, ew, cringe. But, but there's a directness of communication that is very refreshing, on the Camino. That is, I don't experience in day-to-day life.
I'm guessing it's been a couple of years. You've had time to write the book, to process the whole thing, and now you're kind of throwing it out in meeting groups like this and doing TV. What kind of reactions are you getting from talking to people?
Well, it's been very nice. I mean, it's been very positive, and I always think when you write a book, it's always a very naked feeling to go out and talk about it, because you were talking earlier about a lot of the emotional stuff in the book. The first book I was writing was a travel book, but it was really a book about getting married again for the second time, and how do we have our own singularity and yet how do we have intimacy at the same time with someone we love, and how do we reconcile those two things? And the answer is, of course, that it's utterly impossible, and yet we have to do it anyway because it's the only game in town, right? And so I was trying to reconcile those two things, and so I would write about the journey of something that was happening where I was going in Patagonia, and then I'd go, well, what was happening underneath, right? And so I'd start typing and go, oh, well, no, I'll never put this in. This is way too personal. And I'll just keep typing, well, this is never going in the book. I'm just writing this for me for right now. Anyway, and then, of course, you read the paragraph at the end and you go, oh, well, there's no chapter without that paragraph. As I'm sure we play these tricks with ourselves, and then now I don't need to play that trick anymore. But I mean, what you need to do, and if you're writing memoir kind of things like this, travel memoir, I guess, or any kind of memoir, is that you're just trying to create identification with the reader, right? So that they read, and when you're sitting in bed at night and you read, look and you go, yeah, I feel like that. Oh, yeah. Oh, I never thought of that like that. Oh, that's really it. You know what I mean? And if you can create that, and you get them nodding their heads, and they create that connection and that investment, and then that's all you want, because then you're not alone anymore, and they go, I love this. You know what I mean? And they've made a friend, and so going out and meeting people like that, and it's wonderful. You do feel a bit naked, more naked than if you're publicizing a TV show or something, where you just talk about a character, and you look really good, and you get your good angle, and, it's a very genuine thing.
Yeah.
But, book people are kind of wonderful, and you're well received. Book people tend to be, kind of introverted people anyway often, so that's broadly generalizing, but anyway, or at least think about things in emotional life and stuff. So in a way that, I don't know, I'm rambling, but I find it very nice, the connection that happens. And
because you get connection from film fans, obviously, and then he's got a funny story in the book about people, I would have never thought of it, but people ask you to pose like it's Weekend at Bernie's,
There'll be one
Please tell me none of you are doing
There'll be one tonight.
Yeah. It's forbidden, right?
There's a moment in the book I'll tell you about.
You did it already, didn't you?
When my kids were young, I kept my young movie star life away from my kids. I talk about this in the book, and because it was such a sort of, not traumatic, it's too big a word, because it was wondrous and amazing what happened to me when I was a kid. But it was almost felt like something that happened to me, and I did not have my hands on the wheel, so it took me a long time to understand it. And so it was something that when my kids were young, I kept it very away from them. I didn't know he was an actor, but that was really all they knew. And when my son Sam was about 8 or 9, we were driving across the country. We were on a big family road trip, and everyone else was taking a nap, and Sam and I went to a diner in Wyoming, in Lander, Wyoming, and the waitress came up and said, "You're that guy from Mannequin." And I was like, yeah. She says, "Oh, Bob! And so anyway, then the chef came out, the cooking, and we're taking pictures, and we're doing all sorts of it, and my son is there, and I'm just really mortified because he's never seen this really happen before. And so anyway, she finally leaves after signing things. She's lovely, but I'm just embarrassed. I'm feeling overprotective, like we talked about with my son. And so I turned to my son after, and I said, "Sammy, how was that for you, kiddo?" And he said, "Oh, Dad, I was so proud." And I realized in that instant I had done everything wrong as a parent. By keeping such a massive part of my experience separate from them. And from then on, from that instant, it's all been fair game. So you want to know about my alcohol problem when I was a young guy? Here's the deal. Okay? I used to take vodka. And you know what I mean? And so my kids will know, they know all about, but, knowledge alone will keep no one sober. But anyway, it's all been sort of, here's who I am.
I know we have to get to questions. I do want to give you a chance before we do that, and when we do that, please use the microphones. They're there for a reason. At 60, it's hard to hear, right? So, but I do want to ask you if you can share a little about your next project or projects.
Well, you're probably talking about the Brat Pack documentary thing.
Well, whenever.
So when I wrote this book several years ago called Brat, about my time in the Brat Pack and all those wonderful, insightful realizations I made too early on, I learned while writing that book and so I realized at the end of that like, wow, this is amazing, this Brat Pack thing. But I'd never talked to any of the other gang about it, because one of the interesting paradoxes of the Brat Pack is the minute it was named, it blew it up. No one wanted to be in a movie together again because no one wanted to be a part of what I was talking about before. So the second it came into being, everyone scattered and no one ever made a movie together again. So I thought, I haven't talked to any of these people in decades. And I now kind of realized what it was to me, and I know it was a seminal event in their lives too, and it changed their place in the world. So I called up everybody and I said, I'm going to make this documentary, can I come talk to you? And so I went and hopped in my car and drove and talked to all the other most of the members of the Brat Pack, and it was a really interesting experience to see how much affection we had for each other now, in a way we didn't when we were kids, because we were young and competitive and scared and all that kind of stuff, whereas now we're just old and we don't care. And it was, and it was in love, and it's kind of, wow, wasn't that an amazing thing that happened? And it's like, yeah. But it's also, we look at each other, we're members of a club that we didn't ask to join and no one else is. Ali Sheedy, and when I was talking to her about it, she goes, I can just look at you and go, and I mean, yeah, and that made me want to start crying, you know what I mean? Because she just looks at me, yeah, I know. And it's basically, she's going, I see you, and I know you see me. And like, that's private. Even though we're out there and thing, you know what I mean? That was a private thing that happened to just us. And it was a weird phenomenon because it's so public and was so identified, or we were having such a different internal experience that everyone was perceiving it from the outside, So to go back and connect with those people who are only members of this little group was really valuable. And so anyway, I'm finishing this documentary about that, and that would hopefully come out in the fall.
Great. No questions, right? No, okay, there we go. Who do we have? Why don't we try the back row? Take it easy on Tony.
Hi, good evening. So we just recently, just last week, saw the re-release of Emilio Estevez's movie about The Way, or about Camino, The Way, that he did with his dad. And I'm curious to, first of all, I find it fascinating that two of you out of the Brat Pack have done pieces about the Camino. Have you ever reconnected with him about his journey?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it when I saw him, and it's a wonderful movie if you haven't seen it. It's a lovely movie. Yeah, no, it's just funny. I mean, they didn't walk it. They just made a movie about it, but which is, I mean that in the way that it's kind of harder, you know what I mean? But, I don't know how, anyway, but they didn't get any blisters or anything. No, but it was just, we just laughed at like, wow, that's weird, dude. Yeah, but it's a lovely movie. I recommend it.
About right here. Sure. Okay.
I'm just curious about, excuse me. I have a teacher voice. I'm a high school teacher, I don't need this. The 27 years difference, obviously you're two different people when you went as a kid and you went as a 60-year-old dad, by the way.
I was 58.
Got you.
31 before.
was it? Yes. But if I should...
What was the big, oh my God, I'm not even the same person? Was it so vastly different?
Yes. And I should tell you, the first time I walked, why it was life-changing was because I was miserable. I hated the trip. I was having a terrible time. I read about it in a book by a fellow named Jack Hitt called Off the Road. And I always try to mention Jack Hitt because his book changed my life. And books change people's lives, and since we're a book thing, books, and his book changed my life. And so I always mention that. And anyway, I read his book, and I was standing in a bookstore, and I just started flipping through it, and I'm like, I don't care anything about any of this, but somehow I'm mesmerized. I'm doing that. And so I went, and I called Jack Hitt up to get information on it, and how to do it, because anyway, so I went, and it was miserable. I hated it. Every day was worse than the day before. And about 2 weeks into the walk in Spain, there's a thing called the high meseta, which is this plain of just wheat for days and days and days. It's just wheat fields. You get to the horizon, and it's more wheat to the horizon, and that goes on. And so the third day I was in the wheat, I suddenly was on my knees, and I was sobbing, and I had a massive temper tantrum, and I didn't know why. And as I sat there when it finally subsided, I became aware that I could see really clearly, and I could hear. I was just awake. I just felt really awake, and something dawned on me in that instant. I felt very spacious, and I realized I don't have any fear right now. And I never knew that fear was a dominant factor in my life until that moment of its first absence. And I felt this spaciousness around me. And I don't know, it's not going to turn into an Oprah thing. I know it's a good therapy session, and so that really was a life-changing thing for me to become aware how much fear had played in my life. And it never occurred to me, if I'd already been a public person in movies and this kind of thing, fear, I'm not afraid. I go out there, no, I'm terrified. And that changed my place in the world, utterly, in that moment. It's not like fear is recognized once and goes away, but once you recognize something like that, it can never have the blind hold it always did, and so it comes back all the time. If you're a fearful person, it keeps coming back, and yet I made a decision very soon after that fear would no longer make my decisions. If I'm aware of it, I go, oh, that's fear. Okay, and so that's why ultimately I started traveling the world, and I ultimately became a travel writer because of that moment, and then that led to books, and so it changed my life that moment. So that's why I always wanted to go back to Spain. And the second time around, I just wanted to be as awake as I could be, So yes, and I thought I would recognize everything because it was indelible what happened the first time. I knew every place we were, and when we went back, I recognized none of it. And there were 2 or 3 places that were exactly like what I remembered, but so much of it, I was like, I know I've been here. I know I've been here. I just don't. I don't know, buildings come and go and things, but it was so interesting to me how memory is so fallible, and we construct our.
And without this following you.
Yeah, right. And we construct our lives to sort of fit a narrative that we needed to fit, and so we massage certain events or things so that, and so it was really interesting to sort of go, wow, I thought I knew, but I didn't at all. And that made me be very present in the now in a certain way that I really enjoyed. So, yeah, I just felt utterly different, really, and I felt very acutely aware, and I wanted to go back to the same route. There are many routes you can walk across the Camino. There are numerous ones, and I wanted to go back on the same one. We walked the Camino Frances, which is the primary main route, and because just for that reason, I wanted to sort of overlay my experience onto what I did before, and in doing that was, we realized how many lives we lead in one life, right?
I don't know where the mics are. Why don't you give this gentleman here?
Thanks, Andrew. I have a question, but I want to give you a little background. First of all, you talked about hearing your son's voice and how that impacts you and changes the way you think, even when they grow up. Listening to you now, I can actually hear you in class. I remember seeing your very first movie and thinking, and it's still coming out, even though it's many years gone by, to actually hear your voice now takes me right back to that first movie. St. Elmo's Fire, of course, and your guest appearance on SVU was phenomenal. I got to tell you that. But the other thing is, I was going to ask you about your childhood, because before I came here, I actually looked up your background on Wikipedia. We have some connections. You grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, is that correct? I was born in Clark, and my nephews were actually born in Westfield. You went to Pingree, if I'm not mistaken. I almost went to Pingree. I wanted to play hockey, and at my public school, I have a hockey team. But I did run cross-country at Bernardsville, which is where some of our cross-country meets were. So I thought that was kind of an interesting. So my question is, what's your fond memories of growing up in Jersey in that area? You know, what do you remember most from that time?
I just went back to Westfield, which is the town I grew up in, to do a book event like 2 weeks ago. It was weird. It was in the movie theater where I first saw Jaws in 1975, and I was like, oh my God, if you'd told me, you know, X amount of years, like, this is weird. You know, my childhood was a normal childhood in the sense that it was be home by 6. You know, we had a neighborhood, and everyone ran on the street, and kids played in yards, and it was like, be home at 6 for dinner. And my parents had no idea what we were doing in the afternoons. You know, that's long gone, I guess, now in the world, but that's how it was fun. I mean, you know, I grew up terrified of my dad. My dad was a very volatile guy, so I was terrified of him. And, you know, it was interesting when I went to my dad when he was dying, doctor, and I went to him for selfishly so I'd be a better parent to my kids, you know. My wife said, you need to go see your dad. And I was like, you're right. Shit. And, you know, so then all his anger and all his rage was gone, and what was left was just the fear in his eyes. And the instant I saw all that fear, which I suddenly identified with so much from my own Camino thing, and realized, oh, that's where it came from in me. I had such love for him again. You know, that was it. So we just dropped, in that instant, I just dropped our entire legacy and past, and just sort of, we didn't solve anything. We just put it down, and it just doesn't matter. And so there was love there again. It was really nice. But, so my childhood was, you know, go play down the street basketball till Dad came home and yelled at us.
All right, who else?
He was a good guy.
Anybody you want to call out?
Sure, this lady.
Okay, sure.
So towards the end of the book, you told a story about your son coming to you and asking advice about what to do about his friend threatening to commit suicide, and then he ended up getting expelled when he went to authorities about it. I thought that was pretty, I want to hear more about that story, because that was like, wow, that's what we all say, see something, say something, and am I wrong in saying, like, he got kicked out of the school?
Well, my experience is that institutions protect themselves. First and foremost, the institution protects itself. They tell you they're here to nurture your children, protect and serve your children, but they are there to serve themselves and protect themselves at all costs. First and foremost, no matter what platitudes they tell you. Well, you can disagree with me and leave, but that's become my experience, and I didn't know that. So my son was, I don't know how old he was, early teens, and a friend of his she was saying she was going to kill herself, and she started sending him all these videos, suicide videos, and he was really disturbed by this. And I said, Sam, you need to tell the truth. My son was a terrible student, terrible. He couldn't sit still. She was a wonderful student, and other things. So she was a lovely student, and he was a terrible student, and you know, how many parent-teacher meetings did I have? Like, oh my God, another meeting. Okay, so he said, he went and reported it to, I said, well, you need to go tell the teacher. Because I guess by law they have to then report that. But they did not. They turned it and somehow, the long course of events, my son was expelled from school, and by bringing this up and saying that he was inciting her to do this kind of thing, and because it was a long kind of thing, and I didn't know if I just said, hey, fuck you. You owe my son an apology. You don't, what I mean? He'd been branded already as I was when I was a young kid. I was branded stupid because I didn't fit in school and I didn't have interest, and so it took me, and I still harbor resentment for academia, and intimidated by it because I was told I was not smart in school, and so I still am intimidated by it. I was doing a book event in Harvard last couple weeks ago, and I was up walking around Harvard Square, and I found myself walking around, I hate these entitled little motherfuckers. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, I still have not gotten over it. And the whole point of telling that story is that I felt like how I'd failed my son, because I then didn't feel like I was man enough or whatever, and I wasn't good enough for not, and so, well, I just really failed him in hindsight, when I should have at that moment pushed back hard, but somehow they must know, or what did you do that? wait a minute. And then when we dissected later, after when the dust settles, like, oh my God, and so he's still, and one of the things we talked about in the thing is how much that school still pains him. His school experience pains him deeply still. And I really felt like I'd failed my kid, in that, because I was also an area where I'm so weak in, because I'd failed at it. So anyway. But he's fine, he's great. And that girl went to the hospital and got help, and she seems to be fine, I think. But anyway.
You see a lot of bike riders? Because I always wanted to...
Bike riders, she's asking if she saw bike riders on the trail. You gotta get them started on this.
Walkers hate bikers. Are you a biker? We hate you. And I just want to say that
Someone said the same thing to him every time.
well, yeah, every time, there's a phrase on the road called Buen Camino, when you see pass it, Buen Camino, and whenever bikers, because the bikers go zipping past, kicking up dust, knocking you off the trail, and they have this entitled air that what they're doing is more important, and so Sam would always scream back after, Mal Camino, and so, no, we
The only Spanish he speaks in the book.
the only Spanish he speaks, yeah, is Mal Camino. So we hate bikers, yeah. And can I just say, I don't understand, you're a biker, maybe you can explain this. Why do bikers have to wear all these spandex outfits to go biking? Okay? Like when I go play basketball with my kids, I don't put on a Knicks outfit. You know what I mean? I just don't understand. What's wrong with shorts and a t-shirt? So anyway, yes, a lot of people bike the Camino and we don't like them.
Sorry, we got one in the back here.
But we don't judge.
Thank you for being so intimate with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm also very glad to know that your time in purgatory has been cut in half.
Twice.
So a quarter. Let's say a quarter. 3/4.
I really need a third trip, though, I gotta tell you.
My favorite film of yours, and I look forward to reading the book, but my favorite film of yours is Heaven Help Us. And the amount of star power in that movie had to have affected your career. Looking back on that now, could you just share with us maybe your most fondest memory from one of your other supporting actors in Heaven Help Us?
Heaven Help Us was a movie I did early on. It was like the second movie I think I did, and it was a movie about a Catholic boys' school in Brooklyn in 1965. And I've had, to this day, I'll have often large men come up to me on the street. They'll just walk up in front, just stop right in front of me. I'm like, whoa, and they'll just go, Heaven help us. Oh yeah, and there's a certain survivor mentality for people that survive parochial school, and that.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and so people who see that movie have great affection. And it was written by a guy who survived it, and so I have great affection for that movie. I think it's the best movie that I did of that early period of movies, and yeah.
This question was about any actors, though. Anybody?
Any actors? I used to go out with John Hurd. John Hurd taught me to drink. Probably not, but he used to take me, and I was very young, and I wanted to feel so like an adult, and like a peer. And so I used to go drinking at night with John Hurd, who was a wonderful actor. And that was like, I loved that. I just felt so seen, like we talked about that. That was a big deal for me to go out every night from, probably didn't help the work, but it was really worth it to me because I just felt, seen. Beth?
I wanted to ask about Sam's acting career as someone who navigated stardom and celebrity as you did in the 80s. What advice do you give to him about being seen and being true to himself while navigating, a career that's he was fantastic and dead to me, that's growing, and how he navigates that as he goes through life?
Well, I never wanted any of my kids to be actors, of course, and then, God is cruel. And but then I thought, acting saved my life when I was 15. I walked out on stage at the high school play as the Artful Dodger, and that's what I was doing with my life, And so I said, who am I to say what, kids need to find something, whether it's sports or music or acting, whatever, or they find drugs, you know what I mean? So kids need to find something. And so if that's what they've found, and my daughter's also an actress. She's been on Broadway a number of times. I'm like, oh my God, how did this happen to me? But I've also said I wouldn't wish fame on anyone under 30, and So I say to them, you don't want to be famous too young, and you don't want to, and I always, it took I had an acting teacher, and she always used to say, just go back to the work. All you have is the work. Your success and fame and things will come and go and rise and fall, but you just come back with the work is all you have. And it's taken me till the last 5 years of my life to realize it's just the work. That's all that there is. Really, and then the things I've done, I thought Pretty in Pink was an embarrassment. It was a ridiculous movie when we were making it. I thought it's a movie about a girl who wants to go to a dance and make a dress. I mean, who cares? And, I was wrong again. No, I was wrong. And there are other movies I thought that, like, oh, this is really great, this is going to be really, and nothing, crickets. So it's like, you just go to work, move on to the next, go to work. And it's a great satisfaction, isn't it, comfort in, like, realizing, oh, I just go to work. That's the only thing I'm responsible for doing. Show up, go to work, come home. You know what I mean? I've found that to be such a relief. And like, at this point, I don't even think of, and this happens since I turned 60, I don't even think of having a career anymore. I don't even care. I want things to be successful because it'll make my life easier to do. I'm glad the book's on the New York Times bestseller list. That's great because it'll make my next one easier. And it's nice for my ego for about 8 minutes, but then really all it's doing is making my next job, because all I want to do is make stuff. That's the only thing I know how to do, really, whether it's acting or directing or writing, just kind of make stuff and make stuff up. And that's what I love to do, and that's how I locate myself, right? And like you just want to do your thing. And everyone, we just want to do our thing. And if it's successful, then it's easier to do our thing the next time. If you're a perpetual freelancer like me, where, I've had hundreds of jobs in my life, you just want the road ahead to be easier in a certain way, and success helps lubricate that.
All right, we have to get to the last question. Here we go. So maybe we'll get over here. All right.
Okay, first of all, I just love the book. I listened to it on Audible, and I never listen to books on Audible, but I just really thought it was just funny, and Sam was great. And,
Sam was great.
and I just got back from the Camino a few weeks ago, so I really loved listening to it afterwards. My question was about Sam's ex-girlfriend, if she's had any problems with the book. Just curious your reaction to it.
We haven't heard.
Oh, I'm surprised. All right, thank you.
Well, we don't mention.
Would you have listened to the book while you were walking? Would you have known? Okay. All right, these guys.
If you don't have time to do the full Camino, do you feel like it's still worth it, and what part would you do?
A lot of people walk, that's the thing is, if you don't have time to walk the whole Camino, do people do shorter and which part? Most people, in fact, start just for the last section, last week or so. If you walk the last 100 kilometers even, the last several days, you get this thing called a Compostela, which is like proof that you walked the Camino, which, is completely worthless in my opinion. The reward of the Camino is the doing it. Like having a piece of paper that someone says you did it is like, okay, who cares? You know what I mean? But what is of value is you have a thing called a pilgrim passport, which is like you get stamped all along the whole country. And that's a value. That I kept. And like, because that means something. Having somebody give me a certificate say you walked the Camino, I couldn't have cared less. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of people walk most people do the last week, last 2 weeks, whatever they have, and if that's all you have, then fine, great. A lot of people do it in sections and come back year after year to do it. I mean, I always say, if you have the time or can fight for the time, there's something more than 4 times as good if you do it in one as opposed to 4 separate weeks, because there's something that happens when you just, that accumulation of time and attrition that just multiplies See, I mean, bikers. I mean,
Apparently she's the only biker here. I'm sorry, can we sneak this in? She's been patient.
So I know you like people being direct, so I'm going to be direct.
thanks for coming by.
My question is, would you like to give me a hug in representation for the love that you have for all of your fans?
You want the photo? Wait, we're not ready.